Hello, everybody. Welcome to this very special episode of Rush Deep Dive. Today, we are diving into uh, Geddy Lee's The Lost Demos. So, the audio book that of My Effin Life that came out in November of 2023 had two tracks called "Gone" and "I Am You Are," and they're more or less the lost demos. And today we're going to be from My Favorite Headache, I should mention, and we're going to be discussing those today. So let me first introduce our panel here. We are not just six people that look very smart wearing glasses. We have Donna Halper, top left-hand corner, Ben Mink in the center, David Calcano of Fantoons on the top right, and then a few of our channel regulars, Paul Simon in the bottom left, myself, Ryan Murphy, and Eric Winter in the bottom right. And wonderful panel. We're going to talk about the artwork, unearthing these songs. We're going to talk about the songs themselves, and probably various other stories will come up throughout the episode. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about the artwork in typical Rush deep dive fashion. So for those that don't know, David Calcano of Fantoons Animation Studios, you and your team did the artwork for the lost demos, and
Yes.
the artwork is absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and at a certain point here, I'm going to share my screen with the versions of kind of how this went about. So go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's such a treat to finally be talking to you guys, and it's such a momentous time, right? That we got new songs. I mean, I could be more excited when I first realized that we were gonna get new tracks by Geddy. So that was amazing. And for me personally, then when I got the call that we were going to be doing the artwork, I was completely floored, of not just being, I mean, the occasion, but we were completely honored that he would trust us to do this after not releasing new music for such a long time. And of course, I mean, as it happens when you get a beautiful opportunity like this one, it's always you're probably at the wrong time personally, because I was on vacation when I got the call. And but of course, I was on vacation with Linda. Linda is a co-founder of Fantoons with me. She's my wife, and she's been always been so supportive of me doing all this crazy stuff at always the wrong times, but she enjoys it, and otherwise we wouldn't be together anymore, I think. But when I got the call and we started working, and we were in Finland, so I got to listen to the tracks, and they were absolutely stunning and beautiful, and particularly I connected immediately with Gone. And so I started to sort of juggle with some concepts at the beginning of what would it connect. Obviously, I mean, we are sort of known because we do a lot of little parodies and things like that, but these songs have such a deep lyrical content that we were not going to joke around with it. It had to be something that was almost sublime, that could represent the music in the best possible way. And I mean, and God has the perfect time always. And I was in Finland, and I was looking at the Northern Lights, and we were lucky enough to actually see the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis. And we were taking pictures there, and it was an incredibly magical time. And when it was a guy that actually took us to try to hunt the Northern Lights, because you don't always see them. But I was looking at the Northern Lights, listening to this guy talk about how the Northern Lights help a lot of people deal with loss. For some people, the Northern Lights are spirits that are in the far beyond, having fun. And for other people, it gives them reassurance that their problems are going to go away. It's almost like a force that is beyond our comprehension in many cultures. And to me, that connected perfectly with a lot of the lyrical content that Geddy had in the tracks. How to deal with Neil's loss, or even without knowing that it was Neil's loss, you look at the lyrical content, and it's just about dealing with that person that goes away. And as you do when you're creating artwork, you try to find that sort of like funnel internally in your heart on how do you deal with loss. And I couldn't help but also remember about my dad. My dad passed away from cancer 10 years ago. And I was completely lost when that happened, because that he was my best friend. And a lot of the elements in the lyrics actually just reminded me about when I lost my dad. And when you combine that with the Northern Lights and everything, I mean, that's when I got the idea of bringing those photographs that I took of the Northern Lights to almost be the protagonist of the album cover. And so that's when I started to scribble around, selecting some of the photos that we had. I involved the team. We had numerous calls about it. We wanted to also bring a little bit of the my favorite headache key elements into the artwork, like the man itself. And you could see here, this is just a little glimpse of what we did. We did a lot more. The concept, the version 3, for example, was trying to deal with loss with yourself. That's why we had the two people there. That was a different picture of the Northern Lights as well. And we were trying to find colors that would also initially feed the mood of loss, and we found those purples and greens to try to also link it with the colors in My Favorite Headache, so that it feels connected, because ultimately this is actually from the sessions from that record. So that was very, very important to us. So and then when you look at, for example, version 5, then that perhaps was too far away from the original artwork, and we wanted people to also do the connection. And there are many, many other iterations of these, but you can see that we were looking at very elegant and very minimal elements that would basically enhance the photograph with those graphics in to kind of make it worthwhile and make it a good companion to the music. But it was actually Lindsay Lee, when she kind of put the photo kind of around, and then made it like almost like you're looking at the future and then you're leaving the past behind as the light, that we were all kind of in awe about that particular version. And that's when I was like, well, this is actually the one that we needed to select. And however, I mean, that was not my call. I'll be that very clear. That was Geddy's call. We sent him several different versions, and he was the one who ultimately got connected. But I think we all knew that was going to be the one in the end.
Yeah. Now, I have a question for you, because when I first showed this artwork to my mother, she said, "Is that supposed to be Geddy, a silhouette of Geddy's face, or on
No,
the cover?" It's not.
no, it's not. It's not.
Okay, because
Definitely.
it's to me it seems like it could be. That's why I asked.
Yeah, no, we obviously, I mean, we did our own interpretation of that from the artwork, but I mean, you could that well, I'll say this: people can make their own interpretations about art, but
Sure.
that was not the original intent, and it's always the same thing. And I think Ben can probably speak that even much better than myself. That everybody takes their own interpretation about what a piece of art means. If people want to think that's Getty, that's okay.
Sure.
I'm not gonna ruin anybody's interpretation of art, because that's not the whole point.
It's beautiful. It's a
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, it's fantastic. Phenomenal work.
Thank you very much. That means a lot, guys. Especially
Anybody yeah, anybody have any questions for David about the artwork?
No, I just want to say I agree. I think it's just brilliant, just beautiful. I saw Getty showed it to me, I guess about 3 weeks ago, a month ago, and instantly I just said yes. I did think it was his profiles more or less, But I understood all the references you made, and the just beautiful, really, really
Thank you,
beautiful.
Ben. That means you have no idea what that means to me, man. That means a lot.
Well, I wouldn't say it if I didn't. I didn't know you were going to be here. I had no idea you were the person responsible for it. But great job, really
Thank you
beautiful.
so much. Thank you very much.
And what's funny is, so when I posted on our Instagram account, and Paul's shaking his head. So, I posted this on our Instagram account. This is beautiful artwork, and I had no idea you guys even did it at that point. And Paul was like, "Hey, did you know that Fantoons did this?" And I was like, "No, I didn't." I was like, "That's awesome." I was like, "I totally get it. I totally see it." And yeah, so phenomenal job.
Thank you,
I just
guys. Thank you
assumed
so much.
maybe Hugh Syme had some kind of connection to it. But I didn't know, and yeah, I have nothing to say other than fantastic job.
What I think is perfect about it, and the fact that Fantoons was involved, is very often people in the industry, and I say this as somebody who spent 4 decades in the industry. Sometimes we stereotype people, and I don't mean their race, their religion. I'm saying like, oh,
Yeah.
that band does X. And then all of a sudden they come out with Y, and everybody's completely shocked. Like when Kiss came out with I Was Made for Loving You, which is sort of a dance record, for heaven's sake. And those of us that were expecting a Kiss record were like, what? Great song, by the way. And similarly, when people thought Rush, they thought, Neil. Now, years ago, I had a conversation with Geddy when Neil joined the band. And Geddy always had a lot of, how shall I say, he was kind of insecure about his abilities as a writer. He enjoyed writing, but he didn't have confidence in his ability doing it. Now, in fairness, the guy was like 20 or 21 when I met him, but I'm just saying, he sort of thought that Neil would be a much better writer, okay? Now, I think Tears is a great song. I'm sorry. I just think Tears is an excellent song. And I never understood why Geddy didn't write more songs. And when these demos were found, to me, it just reinforced this guy can write songs. Sorry, all you people that thought that he couldn't. And I think that the art reflects that. It reflects that sense of discovery. It reflects the lights, what you don't expect, the journey, the delicacy, and yet the motion. I mean, it's just an incredible way to introduce what you didn't expect.
Wow. Thank you, Donna. That means a lot.
Well said.
Very well said.
Yep, for sure. That was a fantastic discussion. I want to just talk just briefly about let each panelist kind of give their first impression of the two songs, just maybe a sentence or two. So, Donna, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, obviously I'm prejudiced. I've known Geddy for, oh my God, 49 years. And whatever he does, God bless him. I'm just so happy he's still making music. But while I understand that Gone, written as it was about the loss of Selena, and then later on it could be applied to Neil himself, I really resonate with I Am You Are. What came up for me immediately was a song by Neil Diamond called I Am, I Said, which is, by the way, one of my favorite songs. And I had the privilege back when I was a young reporter. One of my first assignments was covering Neil Diamond for ABC Radio, and I was terrified. He was so nice. And he did, I Am, I Said, and he talked about how he had written it and what his process was and this and that. I won't bore you with details. But my point is, it was a very introspective look at who are we? Who do we think we are? Who are we in relationship? How much do we lose ourselves in a relationship? How much do we gain a different self? There's always this push and this pull. And historically, if you were female and you were going with a musician, it was understood that you would be the subordinate one. You would be the one that was at home. You would be the one that was raising the kids. You would be the one that understood that your man was never there and he was never going to be there. And that was the trade-off. And yet, Nancy wanted a career. Nancy had the right to have a career. Nancy loved Geddy dearly. Geddy loved Nancy. That is no BS. Everyone that knows them will speak to that. But on the other hand, you have two human beings, each with their own sets of needs. And those needs are not just sexual, they're not just physical, they're certainly involving being happy for the other person. But where are you? And who are you? And who am I when I'm with you? And when I listened to that song, I got that push and pull that's in the relationship. And Geddy said that that he has had several rough patches with Nancy. He's been very public about that. He spoke about it in the book. He spoke about it on stage. And the song, while perhaps not directly about that, it's about that. And I think anyone who has ever been in a relationship where you're trying to be yourself, but also be with the other. I just thought it was an incredibly moving and very emotional song. And that's probably more than you ever wanted me to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll deep dive the lyrics and the music momentarily as a group. But yeah, I mean, Paul, your first, I guess, initial thoughts. Yeah.
Initial thoughts. I'm an audiobook junkie, so I had mine pre-ordered and I was all set and ready for them to be the thing I woke up to that next morning, sort of like an early Christmas. So there I am with my coffee that first morning. First time in my life I've skipped to the end of a book for anything, but it was the last two tracks in the audiobook. So listening to Gone, I'm actually messaging Ryan on Messenger, and Gone starts, and I'm like, this is awfully heavy for 5 a.m. And it just taking it all in, that first listen to lyrics, listen to the melody. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to need a second on this one. That was intense and beautiful and wow. And then actually, not to parrot Donna, but then I Am You Are started, and immediately, and this is, I'll keep it to first impression and move on, but the way you did the guitar and violin, the way they work together on this song is phenomenal. That was my first impression. I'll leave the lyrical and other stuff for later in the conversation, but that was my first impression on that one.
Yeah, not trying to embarrass you, Ben, but like the work that you guys do together on that is just, it's just aces. It really is.
Well, we had I guess a 25-year gap in which to assess. There wasn't much added. I think just Geddy redid a bass part, and I was asked to do some more violin because there were large caverns of sound where nothing was happening, which I was happy to do. It was really fun to play on. But you have a lot more perspective after you pull something out, and I mean, that's a long time ago. And it definitely held up, but you know what it's missing, you know what you don't want to touch, and it's easier really to do it that way.
Yeah. For me, yeah. So Paul and I were talking back and forth, like when these came out, and my believe it or not, my first listen to Gone was in the line at Dunkin' Donuts. So it wasn't exactly the perfect place to I was like, yeah, this song just isn't resonating with me right now, so let me give it another listen later. But no, I mean, my first impression of I Am You Are was, this is very My Favorite Headachy, right? So like it was very, this could totally fit. And my first impression of Gone was, yeah, maybe it could fit. Second and third listens, I was like, yeah, okay, totally. This is a fantastic track as well. It didn't resonate with me, obviously, in first listen, like I just explained why. But yeah, no, I think my first impressions of both songs were just, you all know how much I love My Favorite Headache, a top 5 record for me, not just in Rushland, but in of all records, right? So I was like, wow, we get 2 more. We call them demos, but to me, they're like polished songs, right? So we get 2 more Geddy and Ben Mink tracks. I'm like, okay, like that was my first impression, was this is awesome. So yeah, it's really it before we dive into the music. That's my first impression. So Eric, your first impression?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of the flip. The first time I listened to I Am You Are, my first impression was the lyrics are kind of awkward. And maybe that's on purpose, right? Like sometimes these conversations and relationships can be pretty awkward. But I think the reason that felt that way to me is back in elementary school, we'd have these times where the school counselor would come in and say, when you have a conflict with your classmate, you're going to get up there and you're going to say, I feel this way. And then when you do this, it makes me feel like that. And we'd act it out, and it was the worst. I hated those scenarios. So that's the first thing I thought of when this song came on, and it's grown on me a little bit since then. But Gone is the song that I have not been able to stop listening to. It's remarkably haunting, somewhat simpler, it seems, in orchestration and arrangement than the rest of them, but it works in such a remarkable way. I can't stop listening to it.
Good stuff. Now, David, you kind of touched on this a little bit. You know, you were in Finland when you first released. Is that correct? Like
Yes, that's absolutely right.
All right. So you weren't in line at Dunkin' Donuts. You were in Finland. Okay.
No,
So what do you got?
I was in the right place, and funnily, I mean, obviously, I'm not a native English speaker, and every time I listen to a track the first time, I never pay attention to the lyrics. I don't know if that's how always my head works. It's always the melody and the music, and then after a couple of listens, then my mind starts to kind of pay attention to the lyrics. In fact, I mean, you will hear probably from a lot of people that are not natives that they would sing the songs just to kind of with blabbing words and stuff, because it's the music that connects to your heart. And when I heard Gone, the melody, I thought it was just phenomenal. I could not, I mean, it made me feel so freaking sad, you know, when I listened to the track, and that I completely fell in love with the tune without knowing what it was about, without knowing that it was initially about Neil's tragedy in the late 90s. I mean, it was, none of it matters. It's just the melody for me made it, and to a certain extent, I Am You Are, as it also, I also really connected, but with Gone, it was like I mean, it got me at hello, basically, you know. The melody was completely inside of me, and then I started to kind of understand the lyrics after that, but I wanted to cry with just the melody, so that's always a good sign for me.
Okay, I want to read briefly.
Before you do that, Ryan, can I just ask Ben a quick question?
Go for it.
Now, we had started talking off air about the process of how this all got discovered. So before we revisit how the tapes got discovered, listening back to something that you hadn't heard in probably years and might have even forgotten about, how did it sound to you when you heard it after all these years?
Good
It
question.
sounded great. It sounded great. That's what surprised me. I wasn't even sure what I was listening to. I mean, you know, because I was going through numerous sound files, and a lot were labeled, and we would, you know, Geddy and I would create these comedic titles for these things, because a lot of them didn't have lyrics at that point. So we would have, you know, just sketch tapes of chords, and then something else would develop a little further, and it might have a humming melody or something. So this came up, and I wasn't looking at what it said on it was originally on just a CD, like a blank burned CD. And I'm going through I had days of files and pictures and notes and things. I'll tell you the story in a little more detail chronologically. But when I first heard them, I simply said, what the hell is that? Is really good. And then he started singing, and I'm going, this sounds familiar. I don't remember if it's on the album or not. I really couldn't tell. Like maybe it was an earlier version that had changed a little bit. But I finished it and made an MP3 and sent it to Geddy. And I go, do you remember these? And he was just as stunned. He goes, am I dreaming, or do these really sound as good as I think they sound? And I go, I think they do. And then the conversation went forward from there. But it was just in the dark corners of the spiderweb basement,
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize if they're not in the industry, and if you're a poet, then you also know what I'm talking about. A lot of work never gets finished. It's like you do a few verses, you jot it down, and then you're like, just not feeling it, and you put it somewhere. Or you do a few, a few verses, you sort of demo it, you figure, I don't think so, and then years later to have the opportunity to revisit it and maybe finish it, maybe go, now I've got some inspiration.
No, it's true. But, sometimes, you could be working in collaboration with somebody, and their feeling about the song is often informed and driven by what they're going through that time. Like I have a couple songs I wrote with Katie Lang that never got finished. The world will never hear them. And I think they're as good as anything we ever did, but she had different feelings about it at the time. I guess it conjured a painful moment for her, so they never got finished. And that's how it is. There's stuff that just you're dealing with people and emotions, and
I don't think that Geddy expected to find this, Ben. Am I right? I mean, it wasn't like he was looking for this. I mean, he was back in Toronto looking for stuff for his book. So how did you get into the picture?
Well, what happened was, and I'd forgotten this, but I think in July 2020, Daniel Richler had sent me a email saying, we're looking for pictures or anything that you may have that would help out the book. Do you have anything for My Favorite Headache? And I had gone through some stuff a few years earlier when we did a vinyl version of the album. Mm-hmm. So I had it all in one big folder, but there was so much stuff. And anyway, Daniel started the search, and I went through and I sent him, I looked at my phone this morning. I got these hilarious pictures of, really dumb song titles and little sketches and all sorts of things that you do while you're creating. And then a couple emails later, I said, I came across these. And so it started with him asking me to look for some stuff. But I guess about 3 weeks later, I found the tapes just in the natural course of sifting through it and archiving.
So can you tell us the funny working titles for these songs, or is that secret?
I think these were actually called what they were. But as we got deeper into writing, you just get a little crazier, and it's I don't think they would mean anything. Like the jokes Geddy and I crack are pretty inside. I don't think anyone really feel they're too fun. They might have to do with what we had for lunch, and then they just grow from there. And I think you'll find a lot of songwriters will write it that way. I mean, it's been said before, and I'm not saying that just because it's, a big song I had, but when I originally started writing with Katie Lang, Constant Craving, which we co-wrote, was called Easter Passover, because they both fell on the same day. And until the very end of the mixing of the record, because she didn't have lyrics then, that's what we referred to it as. So all the demos are called that. I think you'll find that with a lot of writers. They just use placeholders. Yep. And sometimes the placeholders, I know with people like your namesake, Paul Simon, he would use sounds and then create words based around the sounds. And I personally, that's how I do it. When I write lyrics, I just find sounds. They're lyrics. They're not words, really. They're meant to have lyricism. And, I also, like David, I don't listen to lyrics very much. It's the music, it's the tune, it's the vibe. So that if I'm hearing a song from a foreign country, they could be criticizing me for all I know, but I still like the sound of it. I still like the way the lyrics go, because lyrics have a rhythm and they have an angle and a sonic boost that you can't get anywhere. I mean, think of the song, which I'm sure you all know, Tequila. If the word tequila was not there, the song would never have been a hit. It all converges on that moment where everything stops and it goes tequila. Now, to me, if I didn't even know what tequila was, it would still be a hit. But knowing that helps. So.
And as somebody who has worked with words all my life, may I defend lyrics for a second?
Oh, no, there's no argument. It's just
but no, all joking aside, as a DJ,
yeah.
very often certain songs resonate, said Donna, thinking of Working Man. When you hear certain lyrics, they're just going to speak to some people. They're going to describe an experience they've had. And even years later, when they haven't had that experience for like 40 years, I can still hear a song I played when I was a DJ, and it takes me back to where I was at that time, at that place. It's great songs are like time machines. They're like time capsules. And you're right. The words are sometimes secondary to the melody and the beat, but when it's all working together.
Yeah, but it's just a personal, and it's based on nostalgia, really. I mean, why does anybody go to see a rock concert when you're 90 years old, or the Mills Brothers, anybody? It's nostalgia. And it the same way a diamond ring has significance, really it's just a hunk of clear rock. But we're people. And we emote, and the foundation of what is true and strong to us is based on those moments. So it works.
Absolutely. And you're right about the working title thing. Alex told me that he had a couple of versions of what became his blah, blah, blah speech at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he showed them to me. And one of them was a perfectly straight, I'd like to thank my mother, I'd like to thank my father, I'd like to thank the Academy, and then he just got up there after having sat through 25 minutes of Quincy Jones discussing everything that had happened in his life since he was 5. And we're all sitting there like, kill me now. Okay. I mean, just like, please, will this be over? And Alex said when he read the room was like, just, is somebody going to get the hook? And he just felt like the blah, blah, blah speech would be perfect. And he wasn't dissing Quincy Jones. He said he had great admiration for Quincy, but.
Yeah, I was there too. I remember it. It was pretty funny.
It really was. And it was perfect. But if you have to explain it to people, I'm not sure everybody understands what it was he was doing. Not because they're stupid, but because it was very context driven. Later, though, because of his delivery, it just became funny.
Yep. For sure. I'm going to defer reading this until we discuss the songs momentarily. I want to now turn it over to you again, Ben, and to talk about, kind of the unearthing of these songs and what you were telling us prior to recording. Just turn it over to you to tell any stories you want about how this whole thing came about.
After I sent these songs to Geddy, and he called me back and said, are they as good as I think they are? And I go, I think they are. And he thought they'd be a really good addition to the book in some form. He goes, well, how do we deal with it? We didn't have the independent parts at that point. We didn't have the tracks. I just had a mix of the songs. But the mix itself, it was sort of oversaturated and had a drum machine, but it still had a thing. And I originally thought, hey, you know, this would be cool, just like, you know, the long lost demos that are cool. They are what they are. No one would really expect it to be highly polished or, you know, balanced. And I felt they still worked, that, you know, the vocals were great. That's really what struck me the most, especially on I Am You Are. And it just had a thing. So, you know, he thought about it a little bit, and you know, Geddy likes to develop things. He really thinks he's very detail oriented. And to his credit, you know, he said, let's see if we can find the parts. So he went through his whole hard drive bank. I didn't have any copies of that. The hard drives were all done at the studio, and his camp were in charge of that. I had independent storage files that were popular at the time that nobody can even play back anymore. And he did find the parts. He had the drive. He had it sent to a special facility that retrieved them, and he looked at them, and he had David Bottrill involved even in that step. And he said, "Okay, we've got the parts." So David said, "Leave it with me," and he did a very rough mix just to see what was there. And every version he did, it all really sounded good. We tried replacing the drums a bit with more electronic drums that sounded, you know, add 20 years to technology, and you get something that doesn't sound like a robotic, you know, boom, ka. And it did help. Everything helped. So at one point, the big question really was, do we want to try real drums on it? And we didn't want to start to, you know, go through the battle, considering the history and how sensitive it is of other drummers and everything. And we thought we would try, you know, Geddy knows David Steinberg. He does work for him in other capacities. And he thought, hey, let's just get in there for 5 minutes and see what a real drum sounds like. So they brought him. I wasn't there. You know, this was done in Toronto, and I live in Vancouver. But he went in there just like in a few hours, I think, and started banging away there. And then I got a version of the tape, and they said, you know, asked me what I think. I said, I think it sounds great. Everybody did. It just fit the song. He got it right away. You know, he was mapping it off of the drum machine parts that Geddy had primarily programmed in, as far as I can remember. But it just all worked, and there was no point trying to replace something that was working. So we said, great, thank you, David. And then we went a little bit further. Geddy wanted to, you know, based on what he was hearing with the independent tracks, replace one of the bass parts. And that worked. And then at one point, David Bottrill said, you know, the bridge on I Am You Are, there's nothing going on there. He said, you know, maybe some electric violin would work. And so they asked me, do you want to, hey, you want to try something there? And I go, hey, I mean, I'm always happy to play on something like that. It'd be great. So I was up at the same cottage that I discovered the tapes at, and, you know, there's nothing to do but look at the ocean there. And I plugged it in and started playing, but it felt like there were other areas that needed it. And I just figured I'll just play through it, you know, let the guys in Toronto have much better perspective, because, you know, it's one of the main laments I have about the way people record all together now. It used to be a band or community driven activity. And if you went up there and you played a solo, you had the band going, yeah, fucking great. You know, everybody knew what was good. When you're on your own and there's nothing around except, you know, a coffee machine and a window and a bird, you don't really know. You could be throwing out the greatest moment of your life because, you know, whatever, you got a headache and you don't know. You need perspective. And that's the hardest thing. And I was concerned about that. I didn't have perspective. And I just said, look, just use what you like. But the other thing too is you're handing it over to people who make their choice. You don't have final say. Even if they're as supremely talented as Geddy and David Bottrill, you just don't know. It's an opinion. But I sent it to them, and I trust them immensely, and they ended up using most of it. So
That's
and
what I was saying at the very beginning, and I wasn't trying to embarrass you. There is so much chemistry that you would swear that this was like all at the same time. Y'all got together, everybody. If you hadn't told us what you told us, okay?
well,
And, and I'm
but
just Joe or Jane average listener, and I'm like,
yeah,
wow,
but
the chemistry here is just
we know
phenomenal.
we know each other. Like,
Yeah. And it shows.
Yeah, I mean, David Bottrill suggested, maybe you could just do some, responses to his vocal things after. Now, that's a mature and well-seasoned statement to make to a player. Most players know that anyway. You don't play exactly when the vocal is. You wait a sec, you dovetail. So, I'm very aware of that, and having worked with so many vocalists in my career, that's just second nature. But and I played the guitar part, so I know what I played. And so you just take on a different character. It's like you're playing with your own brother, and it's fun. Above all, it's fun. And you hope that comes through, or some emotional connection comes through.
Well,
It's
he
just
has
hard.
such respect for your work, Ben. I'm serious. He really,
Well,
he said that. He said that.
Yeah. Well, I don't have to, I do have to say, he's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. He's incredibly gifted in so many areas. And as a human, I think, what I would really say, I'm not going to tell you any stories in there, but I know him on, in the private moments where I know how much he gives to his friends. I know how much he gives, and he doesn't have to, but that's who he is.
He's a mensch. He's definitely a mensch.
Soulful person. And I'm happy to have met him in my life. He's helped me enormously in my most difficult times, and I hope I have for him.
It's funny you say that, Ben, because there's been a handful of comments that I see all over the internet now after the release of this book that folks say, "Oh, well, the one thing we learned was Rush. They were cokeheads." Like, and they're like, "Oh, well, now my whole perception of Geddy and the band has just diminished." Well, like, no, I see it the other way around in two ways. Well, he's honest, which we always knew, but he's open and honest. But like what you just said, like, I think if there's anything that we can take from Rush or Geddy in this case as a role model is just that: be kind, be respectful. The giving aspect. Like, that's it's not just for me. It's not just the music. It's the type of people that they are, and that to me is role model enough, right? So,
well, look, it's given to fans. He always goes the extra mile for the fans.
Yeah.
And he just gives,
And
with the baseballs recently, right?
the gratefulness. I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but he didn't have to invite me. No, but seriously, he didn't have to invite me up on stage. He really didn't. Okay. He could have had anyone in Cleveland or any other city for that matter. I think he knows a few people. You know what I'm saying? And, there's a multitude of famous people with ties to Cleveland that he could have had. But he wanted to say thank you because he acknowledged what I did for his career. But he didn't have to. There are so many people out there that they never say thank you. It's like you do something for them and then you just cease to exist because they're done with you. And yet for all of these years, even after I wasn't in the industry anymore, sure, I still fought to get them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, this and that. That's friendship. But I'm saying over the years, so many people that I helped, they never even said thank you. After I got their records played, they were done. But Rush kept in touch for decades. And when I was up on stage, one of the first things Geddy said was something to the equivalent of, "I wouldn't have a career if it weren't for what you did." And, it's like, not a dry eye in the house. And he
Yeah.
meant it. And he didn't have to say it. And the
Yeah.
fact that that is the kind of person he is what Ben is talking about. Because I also, obviously, I don't know him as well as Ben does, because I don't know him in the musical way. But I've seen him in a lot of those unguarded moments too. And yeah, what you see is what you get. Absolutely. There's no act, there's no artifice, there's no don't you know who I am? No, this is a Minch.
Yes.
Well,
Absolutely.
you were the right choice. Let's just say that for Cleveland.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
I think everybody agrees with that
grateful
because
every day.
I mean, when we shared who the host for Cleveland was, everyone was like, no brainer. You know what I mean? So,
Well, grateful every day.
yeah. And I know you had to stay hush hush, but I wish I knew because I would have made the 10-hour trip out there to for that show.
You've heard of
I know.
NDAs. I had the equivalent of an
I know.
NDA. It was like
Yeah.
nobody is. I mean, my own
Yeah.
husband. It was like,
Oh, okay.
well, I sort of told him because he was kind of wondering if I was heading off to see my boyfriend or what the deal was.
Why is there a suitcase?
Getting on a plane, honey. That limo in the driveway. See ya. You know, so like, yeah, I mean, he knew, but other than that,
yeah,
could not say a word. And I understand. I was sitting backstage throughout the entire first half of the show, and nobody could see me because I was like behind a curtain, you know, and it was just hilarious as everybody's guessing who it's going to be. And it was just an amazing experience.
That's awesome. All right. Briefly from the book, because this leads into Gone, what I'm about to read. So, so this is about Ben and Geddy. So then in 1997, towards the end of the Test for Echo tour, we had loosely made plans to get together in Toronto and see if we could get past the Yiddish jokes to write some music. But disaster struck Neil's life and our would-be collaboration fell to the wayside. As time dragged on after Jackie's death, Jackie being Neil's wife, I found myself badly in need of somewhere to put my emotions, something to do to take my mind off of all the woe. Creating music was what I did, so I spoke to Ben about reviving our plans. Hanging out together as easily as we did was a welcome balm for the soul, but could we take it to a more professional level? And would the friendship survive getting serious? We decided to give it a whirl. He came to Toronto for a couple of days in my home studio, and with Neil's Cataclysm still at the forefront of my mind, the first song we wrote was Gone, a ballad about loss. We spent hours arranging and recording parts for it, but in the end, I decided it was too emotionally raw. I'm not going to read any more here, but basically goes on. He wasn't comfortable releasing it to the public, you know, and it remains in the vault as a demo. So for those that have the book, starts on page 403, so you can go in and read the rest. Buy the book if you haven't already. But yeah, Gone. So this is the first track for My Favorite Headache, right? And it never saw the light of day until now. And I think that's just, you know, it's really cool, I think, in terms of a tone setter. And I kind of wanted to ask you, Ben, did this song, being the first song, did this set any tone for the sessions and the recording and so on and so forth, or not really?
No, I don't think it set a tone. We just started, and I think this is emotionally where we started, especially with where Geddy was.
Yep.
I was no longer living in Toronto at the time, but I was there when a lot of this was going down, and I remember very well, you know, the feeling, and it was such a brutal onslaught and so emotionally, you couldn't even make sense of it. And for Geddy being that close to all of it, I think it was, like you said, it just way too raw. And I think we knew it when we finished it. It was a way to get emotionally what was in front of us on the table out. And then once it's there, you just go, you know, it's like looking at a painful video. It's too soon, too early. And we had enough ideas to keep going. I don't remember what we tried to write next, but I'm sure it was faster and more upbeat and funnier, as an antidote. So I think we just put it in the cupboard. I mean, it was on the final list. I just came across the final list of tunes. You know, we had the entirety of songs that were considered for my favorite headache at the end, and what we had to do. And those tunes are listed there. So they were completed to a certain point. But, you know, then you have to figure out what you want to mix, what you want to spend your time on, because the clock ticks. And they got chopped at that point. I think we had enough mid-tempo songs, so we picked, you know, I don't know, just another song with that same tempo. And Gone was just too raw. So it got put in the cupboard.
That's
Just
fair.
a quick question, Ben. Do you think that's the reason why actually the song is so good, because it's pure raw emotion put into music?
I don't know. Because you can have pure raw emotion put into a song, and it's just it can be an overly sentimental piece of, you know, who wants to listen to this? I think perspective has a lot to do with it. You know, some songs hold up over time. You know, you can write a song and it may not work for the year it's written in, and then music has a way of evolving, and suddenly the world is ready for a song like that, and it can work in reverse. You know, you can write a great song, have a wah-wah pedal on it, and that can destroy a great song because it's captured in the era of disco or whatever, and the framework of a song has a lot to do with its success and its lasting greatness. You just don't know. I mean, timing really is everything, and but someone has to believe in it, and sometimes it's unanimous. I mean, I still didn't know how these two songs were going to be received. I don't think Geddy did either. I mean, we liked them. That's the start, but after that, you just don't know. Someone may say, you know what, it's a cool song, I get the sentiment, but you know, it's pretty schmaltzy. I really am not into it. And maybe some people say that. I'm really, really happy you enjoy them, and a lot of people seem to, because it was worth the effort and it was worth finding. And hopefully it makes the world a little better for some people in a very difficult time right now.
Yeah.
Well, what you're saying, Ben, is so true, because just coming from DJ perspective again, I can tell you so many songs that I played, not just me, Donna, but lots of DJs, and we thought they were great songs, and they just stiffed. And then you bring them back a couple of years later. I mean, that happened with Aerosmith, Dream On. That had been released before and died a painful death. It went nowhere. And then we brought it back at WMMS, and we were not the only ones to do it, but we were one of. And all of a sudden, everybody's like, oh my God, what a great song. Same thing with Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues. You know, I can name you a bunch others. So yeah, that song could have come out at that time, and everybody could have gone, yeah, fine.
Well, yeah,
we've all been there.
You know,
and then a few years later, it's like,
not even a few years later. I mean, you know, you take a song like, I saw a little clip of Seal talking about Kiss Like a Rose from a Grave.
Kiss from a Rose. Oh,
and,
yeah.
Yeah. And you know, it completely bombed. It was just like nothing. And a filmmaker saw it and used it for, you know, he rescued the song. And it's just, who doesn't know that song? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about timing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that, you know, there are so many.
That is the thing. And
or sides that become way more popular than, you know, the other side. You just don't know.
In this case, it has another virtue, of course. It's Geddy. But what I'm saying is, even if it weren't Geddy, this is a song that has a certain universality to it that could stand on its own. Now, the fact that it's Geddy, yeah, sure, that gives it a boost. Everybody's eager to hear something more from the guys. But this just happens to be a good song.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, timing wise, it's like, okay, well, more stuff from the guys. Like, well, okay, obviously, I think it's good just because I'm excited to hear more stuff from Geddy or Alex, right? But I don't think that's quite it. I think this is great material, right? I mean, it's not just, oh wow, more stuff from one of the guys in Rush, right? Yeah, it's fantastic. And I think Donna, we talked about this often on Rush Deep Dive, how where words are repeat with Neil's writing, where words are repeated or I guess tweaked to mean something a little bit more, right? And I think with this track, Geddy sings "Gone, Gone, Gone," but then he sings later on in the chorus, "Are you gone?" And I think it's like posing this question of, well, kind of like what David said with like the Northern Lights aspect of it too. It's like you go that you can go there and you can kind of get this perception that that person who has gone kind of sort of hasn't left you in a way. And I feel like that's kind of what that question's posing and how that's being related in the lyrics.
There's also the fear, and Paul can speak to this also, because I mean, I lost my mother and my father within a couple of years of each other. And my father just did not want to be in a world without my mother. Okay. I mean, she was his first love. He never loved anyone else. I mean, years later, women were throwing themselves at my father. He was still a good looking dude, even in his late 70s, not interested. He just wanted to be with my mother. He died holding her picture. Okay. And that's a true story. But for the person who's just lost someone, you almost feel like you don't deserve to be happy. It's like you should be in mourning. And when you find yourself like having those little moments where you're forgetting about the person, you almost feel like you're betraying them. It's like, are you gone? Are you gone? No, you can't be gone. I want you here. I want you in my life. And yet I also want to have a life because I'm still here. And so you start settling in on the impact this person made, how much you loved this person. But I still remember Neil, God rest his soul, saying to me that if he ever got another chance, he would always make sure that his wife and his child knew that he loved them, that he would be there for them. Because while he had loved being out on the road all the time, there was a cost. There was a cost. And he was trying to reconcile that after he came back, and just kind of like, if I do get another chance, and it's like, if you ever do get a chance to love again, is that person really gone? Well, yeah, in some ways, because otherwise, how can you go on with your life? But that person is still within you, still around you, still influencing you. I was not close with my father, God rest his soul. But in some ways, I miss him. I miss what he taught me. I miss what I learned from him. I missed his, Ben will get this, his Menschlichkeit. He was just a hardworking guy. He didn't know how to express himself to his kids, but he worked hard every day to do what he could to make a good life for his family. And that's something I really admire. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I'm sorry he's gone, but yeah, we're life is for the living and we're still here. And I feel like the singer is trying, the singer is every man, the singer is all of us. The singer is trying to reconcile wanting a new life with missing the person that they loved so much. Does that make any sense at all?
Low.
Yeah, I
100%.
think in a simple way, I think it's just disbelief.
Yeah.
I will occasionally come across a video that Apple will so kindly send me on the calendar for reasons I didn't ask of my parents. And I'm looking at it and I go, oh yeah, part of me goes, oh, I should call them, see how that. No, that's not really going to be possible because they ain't here. But it's that kind of feeling like, are you gone? There's enough reminders everywhere. And it's, when the light switch goes out on someone, it's hard to believe it can't go back up again.
Yeah.
And it is. I think it's, for me, I just think the lyric meant disbelief. because you're still in shock. It's too fresh.
Mm-hmm. Paul, I know you got a bunch of stuff to say. Go ahead.
I will try and be brief. But one thing I think the song does so successfully, both lyrically and musically, is the fact that it builds so much. That sense of loss that you feel. It starts off with some of my. I'm not going to go line by line, but first it starts with one sense being affected, and you're vulnerable. And then as you get towards the middle of it, the one line that jumps out at me, and musically you match this so perfectly, but your features are falling from view. As that lost feeling compounds, when you start forgetting what the person looks like, when you start forgetting what they sound like, that increases it. And one thing I noticed, and I want to lean on the production side of this and the music side of this, is that I'm not sure if this was conscious, unconscious, whatever, but it sounded to me like whether it's echo or reverb, but the effects that are being used, the song gets more ethereal sounding, more airy sounding, and to create that isolation feeling the longer the song goes on. So by the end of it, when you're at that last verse and you feel hopeless, the sun cannot rise, you are so isolated, the protagonist is so isolated, there's no need. Let the rain keep falling, as if the universe bleeds. Let the universe bleed. I have nothing left, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that loss is complete and total at that point. And then interpreted however you choose. But then, the music then washes over you. But it sounds to me almost like the effects, that ethereal, those are the words that keep going through my head, are ethereal and airy. But again, the lyrics and the music match so well between keyboards, the guitar, all that. It just seems prolonged, or not prolonged, but as the song starts with right here, then the loss intensifies and the feelings intensify. It was so successfully done, is my point with this one. That's the point I'm trying to make, is that even though in my opening comments I said, yeah, gone, intense, but let me get into this, that as Don alluded to, I suffered the loss of my wife, and this song speaks directly to it. Now, I've gone through the grieving process, et cetera, where I get to the point where I would listen to, for example, a song like The Garden, where I can look at the totality of the circumstances and realize, be happy with the times we had. But when that feeling is so raw, this is exactly what it feels like. So I can believe it is the first thing when everybody sat down with pen to paper or instruments in hand and went, how do I write a song about how this feels? That's how you write a song about how this feels. So successfully, because that is listening to it and getting ready for this, I'm like, this is one of the best songs I've heard that grabs that feeling of, it just intensifies. You lose this, then you start to forget things about it, and that it carries on. So
touching on that, I have a question regarding the arrangement, because to my ear, this song sounds more sparse than I Am You Are, and then even more sparse than the majority of My Favorite Headache. So when you go about writing a song like this, how do you decide enough is enough? This is enough tracks. This is enough instruments.
You don't. I think you run out of time. I mean, it's dependent on the song, of course. I mean, with a song like Gone, you're right, Paul. You're trying to create an unearthly atmosphere. It's not a funky groove down in the earth. It's lofty, and it was perfectly picked up by David with the graphics he did there. I think it's another planet, and it's towards heaven, really, is where you're supposed to exist in a phantom world. Another, you're bridging into another place, and that's often done musically with simply echoes and cavernous, cliff falling sounds, which are echoes and reverbs and shadowy things that it's dimensions. Like when you have a composition of a painting and you have the tree in the front, that's the voice, And then you've got things in the background, fogs and misty waters and things. Those are echoes, or they're strings or something that is soft. And it's all about composition and proximity. I know I'm getting a little technical, but that's how you achieve it. And the achieving that is done through trial and error, instinct, and knowledge of the equipment. And it all gets put together, and then you make a decision. David Bottrill did a great job on that. I mean, we were hinting on it on the demos. To hear it, you'd hear most of that. You'd go, yeah, it's there. But when you get a pro and 20 years more technology, who knows what he's doing and tastefully and masterfully does it, that's the result you get. And you don't want to have to think about it. It's not something, you just should immerse yourself in it, dive into it and swim while you're listening. And, hopefully we achieve that. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perhaps we should have talked about that one second, because that's going to be hard to follow here. Even though we're talking about them sequentially, but yeah, phenomenal track. Go listen to it if you haven't. Let's talk about I Am You Are. I mean, where do we begin? I guess, Paul, you've got some stuff that I know you wanted to touch on, from Geddy's interviews and such surrounding the book. Do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, I will pull up the quote, unless, Ben, if you'd be so kind, I don't know if you had it handy or not, remember the conversation, but or whoever. But as far as the inspiration for the song itself, it's about here it is, I found it. It's about relationships. It's about Geddy. This is quoting Geddy. It's about me in the midst of a difficult conversation with my wife, which happened more than once in my life. I think the personal nature of that made it also maybe something I wasn't prepared to follow through with. He said he rediscovered both tracks last year, and it actually goes on to things we've already discussed. So basically a song being about, in a relationship, difficult topics being addressed.
Sorry, I put you on the spot, Paul. That's my fault. Yeah. No, I will also say here. So this isn't a quote from Classic Rock Magazine. Where is it? So we were recording in Seattle with Matt Cameron, Soundgarden and Pearl Jam drummer, who did drums on My Favorite Headache. And we kept pulling out song after song for him to play. And finally, Geddy said to Ben, "Let's have Mercy on Poor Matt." So those two songs stayed in the can. But there were for other reasons at the time. For me, I will just say this song reminds me / kind of pulls concepts and ideas from two prior Rush songs, one on Counterparts, one on Test for Echo, of course, the two records that were prior to My Favorite Headache. Those being Cold Fire and The Color of Right. Cold Fire, of course, because it's a conversational piece, back and forth, right? And Cold Fire, or rather, The Color of Right, because I spoke about this in the Test for Echo deep dive that we did a couple years ago, where my interpretation of The Color of Right is the musician going on the road, leaving the family behind, another lonely night, all that. And we're going to actually touch on this song beginning of next year in our Rush Roundtable series. So definitely check that out when it comes out. But, I always felt that was about road life. And I feel like, I assume this probably wasn't the intention, but and maybe this is another first impression that I had, but it definitely feels like it pulls from those two songs a bit. Now, the funny thing about The Color of Right, and David, I think you'll get a kick out of this. The Color of Right has, well, Test for Echo, the internal artwork. Every song had internal artwork on that record. Let me show you what The Color of Right's internal artwork is, if it'll let me. Look familiar? So Yeah, I mean it's Northern Lights, right? So which just when I listened to the song and I thought of that, and then I listened to your audio, in the newsletter you sent out through Fantoons. I made that instant connection. So I just, again, I wanted to say this till now and not during the artwork discussion, and just say bravo, because I'm sure I assume that probably wasn't intentional, right? But
No, not at all.
there's
Actually, I didn't
there's
remember that.
yeah, I feel like there is a slight connection there. So um well done, I guess. But yeah, I mean, um Donna, Eric, Ben, anyone want to contribute, or talk about I Am You Are?
What I thought of that is in addition to what I said was, to some degree, it reminded me of Entre Nous, not necessarily musically, but lyrically. Okay,
Yep.
the thing about we're strangers to each other. I mean, here's two people, and again, not just Geddy and Nancy. The key to any good love song is universality. If I can feel like, oh, this could be me. I mean, like there's some songs that are hard for me to identify with because I've just never had that experience. Okay. Like some songs about getting high. I mean, I understand, yep, people get high, but I don't. So it's really hard for me to relate to it other than, oh, this is something my friends do, some of my friends. But in the case of a good love song, it's like, yeah, most of us have been in love at one point in time. And most of us have had relationships where maybe we weren't the right people for each other, even if we did dearly love each other. And I mean, I'm, as many of you know, I'm pretty Jewish identified. I mean, I'm not Orthodox, but being Jewish is real important to me. And when I lived in Washington, D.C., I fell in love with a Baptist minister. And that was not a relationship that was going to go anywhere. And yet we were two people who really did love each other. His name was Larry. He was one of the nicest people I ever met. And he wasn't going to leave his, and I wasn't going to leave mine. And it just was going nowhere. And it was really tough. The breakup was tough. And this isn't just about me. I'm saying, who hasn't had a situation where you fell in love with somebody that just you knew it wasn't going anywhere? And here's two people that really want it to work, but at a certain point, they want different things. And they're both trying to assert themselves. And yet they're kind of planets revolving around each other. They're strangers to each other. Yep. They're trying just between themselves to try to find space where they can both have their own identity and yet still be a couple. And there are times when you just don't know if it's going to work out. And I think it's a really good, really honest, and really pure song. And here's another thing. When I saw Geddy on stage talking about Neil and talking about his love for his wife and talking about some of these other things, that was no act. That vulnerability, to put yourself out there like that in front of so many people. It's one thing to do a music video, okay? You do it one time and 1 million people watch it. But this is like night after night in city after city, just putting yourself out there. I don't know if I could do it, but those songs are a message and something to think about. And they're also the artist laying themselves open so that we can interpret and benefit from their art.
Said.
Yep, very well said. I think I have to ask you, Ben, about the guitar work and the violin parts in this. So from interviews, we're told the track features original guitars and vocals, which I can't get that guitar part out of my head ever since I started listening to it. So fantastic job, fantastic work. But the violin solo, can you talk about that and kind of what went into that and adding
sure.
it?
Well, the guitar parts, I personally, I would have done them again. For me, I mean, the notes are there, and you know, you when you're asking anyone who's the creator of it, they're always going to hear little things that they would have done differently. It was a sketch. That part was really a sketch. It's a little, to me, to my ears, it's a little clumsy. It's, you know, I know the guitar I was using, I think it was a drop D tuning or something like that, and certain parts of the melody of it are not really that strong. So I'm glad I had a chance to reinforce it, especially in the end time through with the violin. But I talked to Geddy about it. It's not that I was going to do it again, but you know, he really liked it, and David Bottrill really liked it. So I said, fine, you know, I'm not gonna. They got ears. I'll just go with it. And but the song was a vast landscape with, it needed one more object in the landscape, and David had suggested the violin, so I just tried to imagine what it would be like if I was in a live band playing it, and I take a different character role. And I got out my violin, and I thought, is acoustic the right thing? No, it rocks too much, but it does. It's got a sensitive subject. It should have some semblance of a real violin tone in there. So I used a combination of the two. I recorded it acoustically at the same time as running the electric pickup through an amp, and you adjust it afterwards. And when I sent the files to David Bottrill, I said, here they are, independent. You know, the echoes that I had chosen, which ended up being very close to what we ended up with. But I was just working on my computer at the cottage, and they were just placeholders really for what I thought he should do. So he reproduced them, and I just had fun playing it. I just did a number of different takes and went, I'm just having fun. So then when I finished, I went and got a scotch and a coffee, and go, okay, I'm going to sit back and listen. Oh, that one's really good. That one's really good. I'll use the end of this here and that. Yeah, that works. Happy with that. And I just cut it together and sent it to them. And actually, that's not true. I had to do some string things too. The track, we felt sonically had to grow. And I had to create a string section part, which was merged with the synthetic strings underneath the synthy strings. And a lot of it's sort of like there's waves coming in and out, where Geddy will sing a line and I'll reinforce it or tag team it to the next phrase. And it's not that they're that evident, but you would hear it in the weight of the way the instruments all come together. And they carry it along, just like waves in the ocean, moving the boat a little further. And that's a little tricky sometimes, because you have to consider everything else that's going on in the track, bass parts, vocal, and you don't want to get in the way of the vocal, because Geddy's voice is in the same range as a violin. And if you do, suddenly you're singing a duet, and you don't want to do that. So you have to work around it. You kind of frame it like it's a collar under the singer. And so it takes some listening, but I knew that it was going to go into good hands afterwards, who would have a fresh perspective on it as well. And really happy with what they did. And we all agreed, you know, it wasn't like just hand off and you get the mix and that's it, which is often the case. David Bottrill was great right to the very end. I had something that bugged me, and he said, let's get on the computer, and we tied our mixes together. And I said, okay, good. Played it back, and I said, just bring this one down a little bit. He goes, right here, how's that sound? I go, great, we're done. And it was a pleasure. It really, really was. It just was fun to play, you know.
Yeah.
Ben, can I ask you a nerdy question? When you were putting together these two songs, were you guys concerned about the sonic landscape from My Favorite Headaches? That these two songs would have to fit within that sort of container, or you kind of forgot about that and then?
They already did. I mean, it's the same time period, I think we were mostly concerned about the drums, because it was a drum machine and it sounded like a drum machine. And you add 20 years of technology to where drum machines are now. I mean, you get guys doing beatboxing that sound better than the drum machine we had. So you don't know how forgiving your listener's going to be with that. And you don't want it to drag it down, especially when you get a song like Gone that's all about the heart.
Yeah.
You don't want a clobbering drum machine going, go, go, go. It's going to sound like a marching robot. You need something that plays with sensitivity, that will understand the gaps and the feel and really make it breathe in a human way that the song demands and respect. So, but those are all aesthetic calls, Somebody else could say, yeah, it works in real contrast, the drum machine, the marching robot. It makes the edge of humanity even greater. It's just an opinion. Yeah. But really, if the vocals and the song is well written enough, it'll survive a number of different treatments. And take your pick. That's why you get so many different mixes when you get people. Who was it? I think I read just Peter Gabriel's new album. He's had a number of different people mix it. He just released them all. I guess it's not a definitive statement, but it's nothing wrong with it.
Well, speaking to the mix, actually with IMUR, I made a note on here after right before it goes into the bridge, where with the line, all the things worth saying, I put guitar and violin answers, violin after 4 measures, transition to solo violin, then under the vocals, the violin lilts, then gains power, then soars throughout and launches. In your outro. So that's
thought that, but
well, whether it's in the mix or in the way you played it, or a combination of both, I would imagine. But it did exactly what you just explained, which is when he comes in with that last IMUR, the violin cradles under it and it waits. He does his vocals, and that's when you take off into that outro solo. And again, exactly what the song needed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks very much.
And that part where the guitar and the violin, I just wondered, we said that was one part that bugged you. I just wondered because that worked perfectly for me, where it was the guitar was there, and then there's 4 measures of it, and then the violin comes in. I just thought it was great the way it was there.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I'm glad it worked.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, there's a song on My Favorite Headache, Working at Perfect. I think these 2 tracks are quite literally perfect with a K. But no, I mean, fantastic. There's really nothing else I can say about it, about them. Fantastic work, Ben, Geddy, David, Donna, with your interview of Geddy on in Cleveland. I guess last thing here. First of all, David, can we get this album cover on a T-shirt maybe soon? Because there's certainly lacking My Favorite Headache T-shirts in the Rush backstage store. So I really like to get one if that's doable. Perhaps we can talk offline.
You know what I think would be a great idea? I think an aspirin line of My Favorite Headache.
I guess the next question is, where does Geddy go from here? Right? I mean, I can tell you what I want to see. I would love to see another solo album with Ben, maybe with Alex. But I think we're all in the camp of Geddy's still got it, and
absolutely does. And may I tell you what we're probably not going to see? And I'm not predicting the future, but I see all of these online fan forums. Oh my God, they're getting another drummer, and they're going out on the road, and they're going to be Rush again. And I'm like, no. The thing that Geddy said, and it's on tape, he said that he and Alex might, and the word might is doing a lot of work there. He might like to get back in the studio and collaborate. But I personally cannot see, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit it, but I personally cannot see them getting a band together and getting back out on the road again 360 days a year. Could they do some stuff together? Sure. Could they write some songs? Could they do a couple of solo? Absolutely. But I just don't, and please, Ben, tell me if I'm wrong, but I just don't hear either of them with an appetite for being out on the road 360 days a year. I mean, they're not 20 years old.
Yep. No.
So I think they're going to have some fun doing some tunes if they can get their schedules to align. And I know there's still some music left in both of them. I know they still feel it. I know they both have still got it. They had fun doing the Taylor Hawkins thing. That just really lit a fire. But let's just leave it there and let them decide what the best thing is for them. And let's not all get out in front of it.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. Ben, can you play drums?
No.
No.
When I have to make up a drum part, I usually will bang on the back of a guitar and dissect it. I go, okay, well, that's the kick, that's the snare. I think I'm a good rhythm guitar player, and I can dissect most of the parts from there. I can describe what a drum needs. I can program drums. No, I can't play drums, but I have done things like I banged on anything really. And today you can create a MIDI map or manipulate the sound in a way that you can make the guitar sound like a great kit of drums. I wouldn't go that far. You can make it sound credible.
Like tambourine once on a folk song many years ago, but
especially with what you hear, like a lot of the whole new generation of guitar players who are tapping like everything in sight on their instrument. They're doing an awful lot of functions on one instrument. But no, I don't play drums. I'd love to. I got a lot of drummers around me.
Yeah. Okay. Any last any final thoughts from anyone before we wrap?
I got a final thought. I don't know when this is going to air, but whatever you celebrate and whoever you celebrate it with, have a wonderful holiday season. As bad as some of our lives have been at some point, there's people that got it a lot worse than us. And we have the privilege of doing what we do, getting around and talking about it. I am going to be 9 years cancer-free next week. I am eternally grateful. Whatever journey you are on, may you live to see a happy, healthy, peaceful new year.
Beautifully said.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly how I was going to take us out. So beautifully said. If you haven't checked out our deep dive into My Favorite Headache, please do that. It's on our channel. But with that, Donna, Ben, David, Paul, Eric, thank you very much. Those watching, thanks for watching. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Scott.